I met this girl in a bar a couple of weeks ago. She had tons of tattoos and I wanted to ask her about them. But at the same time, I recognize this as a common pickup technique to approach an attractive girl and ask her about something obvious. Because it's obvious, it's something that most people would do. But if you want to differentiate yourself, you'll need to behave differently than most thirsty dudes. So I decided to talk to her and find out things about her that made her stand out. This is a pretty good strategy, and it's based on Dale Carnegie, to find something interesting about the people you talk to. If you happen to find something interesting about them that few people know about and that they are particularly proud of, that's much better than asking obvious questions about obvious things. About halfway through our conversation, I noticed that her tattoos were much different. In fact, I think they were based on some very ancient symbols from esoteric magic. I have a friend who is always trying to find shortcuts to making money. Because this guy is always on the lookout for shortcuts, he is always getting scanned by goofy network marketing ideas. There's this psychic who is incredibly powerful and has a very long waiting list. If you are lucky enough to get on this person's waiting list, not only do you have to be patient and wait a year, but you have to do homework to prepare yourself. She'll give you daily journaling exercises. And if you do manage to see her, she'll check to see if you have 365 journal entries. This cannot be faked. On top of that, there is a non-refundable $15,000 fee you must pay if she accepts your homework assignments. So this guy went to see her, she accepted his homework, and he paid $15,000. He only had one question. He wanted to learn the secret to alchemy. In quantum physics, they have the idea of a multiverse, not like in science fiction, but a real idea of a nearly infinite number of universes. This is based on the particle-wave duality of nature. For example, a simple hydrogen atom has one proton in the nucleus and one electron orbiting around that nucleus. But the orbital electron doesn't exist as a particle. This exists as a probability wave. That means that this is everywhere and nowhere at the same time. The only time this pops into existence and becomes a particle is if it interacts somehow with another particle. Then this probability distribution collapses into a single event. But the quantum multiverse theory says that every time this event happens, it must create every other possible event. It does this by somehow being able to create multiple universes, which means that every time any particle in the universe interacts with any other particle, it creates multiple parallel universes. This is much, much more complex than in science fiction. In science fiction, every time the main character makes a different decision, they create different time flows. But according to quantum physics, this happens every single time two particles interact. This means that every single thought you have, which is at least thousands of neurons firing at once, creates at least thousands of different parallel universes. When the first societies started trading with each other, they discovered the economic law of comparative advantage. One society would have something that was in abundant quantities and not very much value. But to another society, this was very valuable. So they would trade, and each would think they were giving very little but receiving a lot in return. The most interesting case of this was when the British Navy started to regularly visit the Polynesian islands. To the Polynesians, metal was very scarce and very valuable, and they had a lot of young Polynesian women who would willingly trade sex for metal. The sailors would pull nails from the ship and trade sex for nails. At first, one nail would get you one sexual encounter with a gorgeous young Polynesian woman. But pretty soon inflation set in, and sex started costing more and more in terms of nails. Theoretically, this same thing might be possible when we finally figure out how to communicate and travel between multiverses. It's highly probable that there are plenty of other parallel universes that have tons of things that we would value, and we have tons of things that they would value. So if we can figure out how to trade with the multiverse, we can get tons of endless energy. She told him it was easy. First, he had to find some basic materials to weave a large cloth. Then he had to soak the cloth in a very careful blend of essential oils. Finally, he had to bury a combination of very easy to get and very cheap metal in the cloth. He had to bury it on land that he owned. And in 1 month's time, he would dig up this cheap metal, and this will have been transformed into gold. It turns out that that is the secret to alchemy. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore, and I asked her about her tattoos. She said that she is a psychic life coach, and she uses the multiverse theory to help people. She said the biggest problem is when people are unsure of what they want and are unsure of the cost they are willing to pay. But she told me that the more you can define your goals, and the more that you are willing to define the cost you're willing to pay, it's much easier. That way, she can create several different futures based on the starting conditions you give her and tell you which one will work the best. Which one of your futures is most likely to lead to success? Which one of your futures will most likely benefit you? The more you define what you want, the more likely you'll be able to get what you want. On the other hand, if you are very, very vague and you only want good stuff and not bad stuff, the future will be vague and undefined. And vague and undefined futures have a habit of defining themselves. After all, if you don't define your future will define you.